I'm on the hunt for this serial killer, and he disappeared around the time of Invasion, but I think he's here in New York. And so it's kind of neat that everybody is going after the same person, but they don't realize that they're not chasing two separate people, they're chasing one. And so this serial killer, with his newly activated metahuman power of being able to interface with technology and then use that to interact with other people and manipulate them, he breaks out. And it's very clear that he has a split personality disorder. His evil personality manifests first through a TV screen that he's interfacing with, and then later on, his entirely innocent, happy husband personality disappears entirely, and it's only this evil being who goes about setting up a digital underworld. And I mean, it's kind of cute. The story's written in the late 80s, so at this point, Moench comes up with an exact number, but it's less than 1 million people who are connected to what we today call the internet or the World Wide Web. And so these 970-some thousand people are pulled into this digital underworld where they will be slaves to this serial killer who plans to destroy Earth. And so all the other souls will be drawn in to the digital underworld, and he'll be its absolute ruler. The story is neat in that you get to midway point and you think that the villain's been killed, but in the end he hasn't. And so everybody comes together at the end, or nearly comes together in trying to take this guy down. But the Spectre has to go into this digital world where he finds that even he's vulnerable to attack. But the story is resolved. The serial killer is finally wiped out of existence in this digital dystopia which he created. And this run is really representative of the growing discontent that fans had with the second half of the Moench run. First off, the art from issue 16 onward, very inconsistent. No set ongoing penciler, inker, colorist. The art, I mean, like a lot of podcasters, I'm going to put it out there. I don't have a shred of talent needed to become a comic book penciler myself. But given that I'm a fan of the medium and that I pay for my comics, I think I do have a right to say when, the art is less than satisfying. And here, it's not like Mark Bagley's art where, Mark Bagley can just put out art really quickly, but it still looks consistent. Like Bagley's Peter Parker looks the same from panel to panel. Here in Ghost in the Machine and other stories for the second half of the run, Corrigan's look changed wildly. The streak of white hair changed constantly. In some issues it didn't even appear. So there was even inconsistent inking and coloring going on. One letter writer wrote in and said to the editor, the only reason I'm still on this book is because of Doug Moench. If he wasn't on it, I would have left this book long ago. Can't we have a regular ongoing penciler? And the editor actually wrote back, sorry, we hear you. We wish there would be a regular art team. So it kind of makes me wonder, was editorial beginning to lose faith in the book? Were certain forces in editorial or at the executive level putting the kibosh on getting a regular artist for the series? Or was it that different artists were looking at what Moench was doing and saying, no, I'm not touching this? Still, you would think that a young upcoming artist who was looking for a regular gig would throw their name in the hat and say, yeah, I'll give it a shot. But such wasn't to be. I think something else which really bothered fans was the bwahaha Justice League type humor that was prevalent throughout the second half of the run. Bug McGrew was a clear analog for Oberon. Hassan Al-Armani came across as kind of like the Dr. Fate to Jim Corrigan's Batman. And that Hassan was the one guy who could speak on the same level as Corrigan. I don't think that Moench was going out to outright copy what Giffen Mateus and McGuire were doing, but I think he and other writers on other titles were looking at what the Justice League guys were doing and saying, yeah, maybe we can try to make it work for our book. And clearly it didn't work here. I think as well the fact that the book changed so quickly and shifted towards a complete paranormal, supernatural style of storytelling, was too much for fans who really wanted to see both Corrigan and the Spectre take down like gangsters and corrupt businessmen and politicians and that. So in the end, Moench had only 2 issues left to try to bring this series to some sort of conclusion. And in the final 2-parter, Corrigan and Gina and Betty went to investigate this haunted house that was occupied by a married couple and their adolescent daughter, who was now probably somewhere around 18, 19. And the family tried vacating the house, but every time they tried vacating, they became so deathly ill they were compelled to return. And it turns out that the house was haunted by the wife's brother. And it turns out there was an incestuous relationship between the wife and her brother, which resulted in the birth of her daughter. And so the woman's husband, in a fit of anger, killed his brother-in-law. And so now the brother-in-law, along with other demon forces, was looking at haunting the house, torturing this family, and consuming his own daughter, using her as a power play of sorts. And we could see that Jim Corrigan was affected by this. He became very aggressive towards Gina. Certainly suggested that even though Corrigan may not have been cheating on Kim with Gina, as was suggested during the second half of this run, there are at least some feelings there. In the end, Betty ended up sacrificing herself to help Corrigan and the Spectre and Gina stop this demon. It just ended on a wide open note. There was no real nice wrapping of a bow, so to speak. I mean, on the one hand, it was saying that Corrigan would continue to be the Spectre, but I mean, fans were off saying, well, what happens now? Like, how does Corrigan go about telling the rest of the team that, Betty has died? Where did they go with this? And indeed, it wouldn't be another 3 years until fans would get another volume of the Spectre, in which Ostrander and Mandrake certainly build upon what came during the Doug Moench run, but at the same time saw a clear need to return the Spectre to what was considered more of the norm, the classic Spectre. But there's one really interesting book that acts as a kind of a midway point between the Moench run and the Ostrander Mandrake run, and it's from the series Books of Magic, and it's basically about a boy named Tim Hunter who has potential as a magic user, and John Constantine and other magic users take Tim under their wing. And in issue number 2, it's really neat because Constantine is taking Tim on this whirlwind ride around the DCU, meeting as many magic users as possible. And included on their stops are Madame Xandu's brownstone, where they go upstairs to the office and they meet Jim Corrigan. And Corrigan comes across as a bit of a jerk towards Constantine. He actually mocks Constantine's English accent and speech mannerisms. And Tim says, I never met someone who had died before and came back. Well, what do you know? A taxi driver who took Tim and John to the brownstone was actually a hired assassin who was trying to kill Tim and Constantine. And Corrigan quickly turns into the Spectre and renders holy vengeance upon the cab driver / would-be assassin. And what we learn here is that Corrigan has changed the name of the agency from Cryptica Crimes to the Corrigan Agency. We don't see any of his other associates, which suggests that he's continuing to operate as a private eye, but he's operating on his own, which has really been the norm for so much of the Spectre's history that we've been looking at so far in this Spotlight series. Constantine has his own remarks about the Spectre, which he shares with Tim. He says to Tim, well, some say that the Spectre is simply Corrigan's soul supercharged, whereas others feel that there is much more to it and that the Spectre is something that is far older than anyone would believe. And in that, Neil Gaiman, who wrote this title, is taking us another step closer to the Ostrander Mandrake reveal that the Spectre is in fact an entity which is bound to a human host. So there you have it, folks. A really interesting period of time in the Spectre's history. Not an especially long period of time, but still significant enough. In terms of where you can find these Copper Age tales, I don't know that the Doug Moench run is going to be collected anytime soon. But certainly look in comic stores, conventions, see if you can get issues for $1 or $2 a pop. Last Days of the Justice Society of America was collected in trade a year ago. It includes all of the Golden Age related Secret Origins tales from Volume 2 of that series. So that includes the Spectre Secret Origin treatment. Hopefully one day DC will get something like Marvel Unlimited so that we can get things like the Doug Moench run of the Spectre and Books of Magic and just read them online. But certainly with this era, it will take some more legwork in terms of pick up the issues. But when it comes to the focus of episode number 124, the entire John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake run of the Spectre is up on Comixology. So for those of you playing at home, get on Comixology and buy the 62 issue run of the Ostrander Mandrake Spectre series. I guarantee is money well spent. This is one of the greatest comics runs in history in my mind, and I can't wait to talk about John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake on the Spectre in episode 124, which will no doubt be a 3-parter with the first 2 parts airing in December and the 3rd part coming in January. Folks, episode 124 will come out in 14 days from now. So until then, this class is dismissed.